Welcome to Hanging with the Hammer. Cue the intro. Good morning. Welcome to Hanging with the Hammer. It is another Saturday morning. Now, I know it's a half hour delayed for some of you, and it's a little bit different. So maybe some of you missed it. You thought I was going to be here at 9. Now I'm here at 9:30. I got my hair cut. That's what the deal is. Certain Saturdays in the month, I schedule a hair appointment, and it's a pretty early one, and that's what I normally do. That's why I'm not wearing my hat today. I like wearing my hat, to be honest. So hopefully we will get some people on the show today. They want to ask some questions. I see a couple people are just starting to come in, and probably the intro's going. No guests scheduled for today's show. Today is a question and answer show, so I will do my best to answer your questions today. Talk about all kinds of things. Now, some of you have been watching my videos know that in the last couple weeks, I've been experimenting with some video things. It started with Sail On, and I just did something where I released some green screen footage. That was the one I did, which was the blues image song, Ride, Captain Ride. And so I'm starting to have some fun with some video things. I will say it's been inspired by Chadwick Perry. I watch what people are doing. The thing with the green screen for me has always been, I just never could figure out how to symmetrically make it work. And then I watched how Chad deals with the green screen, and he kind of it's not as symmetrical as a lot of people use a green screen. They usually take the green screen and take the whole thing out. So I always kind of felt kind of funny because my green screen never took me out. I'm too big to be taken out that way. You know what I mean? Good morning, Blake Nunn drums. So anyhow, with that being said, I'm trying to find artsy ways of using the green screen and using video. The other problem with the green screen for me has been the video side of it. Actually taking video from YouTube. It's become a little bit harder than it was. Unless you subscribe to YouTube, you really can't download video anymore. But there are ways around these things, and that's one of the things that I have found out. So I've been working on the ways around it, and Chad helped me on that too. He gave me a great tip, which is basically you screen record in on your iPad or your iPhone and take the video from there. So I am having a lot of fun with that. Good morning, Blake and Lori Jones. Thank you all for being here. And Lady Dar, my good friend Darlene is here. That's my wife's and my friend Darlene for many, many years. And the conga drums you usually see in a lot of my videos came from Lady Dar. They were her son's congas at one point. I've had them for a long time now, probably, 25 years. So welcome to the live stream, Dar. And anybody else, whoever's on the live stream today, please ask questions. Otherwise, I'm just going to ramble about different things. I don't know what to ramble about today. Today's one of those days where I'm just having fun. And, I want to keep this going. So what I'm trying to do is do a live stream once a week to keep it going and maybe get a following that follows the live stream. Now, I do want to do my Ask Girl Anything show. I have a couple questions for that. Not a lot, not normal, but I have some people that watch Ask Girl Anything, and I want to make sure that I actually take some questions and do an Ask Girl Anything segment from there. Welcome, CCM drummer today. Any questions, guys, that are in the chat? I see I've got 8 in the chat. One of you guys might have a question to start me off today. That'd be great. Great thing. Now, I will say that one of the things I am hoping to do is keep the live stream to question days and also having guest days, like last week, having, Kelly Kusumoto on K-Man Can Drums. That's how you say it. Anyhow, Kelly was a great guest. Had a lot of fun with that. Thank you, Lori, for the question, and I will get to that question in a second. So my intention is to bring people on, and I'm hoping to have some surprise guests, people that are in the community. I want to highlight people in the community. I also want to highlight friends, people I've worked with or are good friends of mine, drummer friends that I know that I can bring in and introduce to the community, who aren't necessarily YouTubers but are great musicians. So that's going to be my goal in doing this, is going to be doing some of that. So, but your questions make the show. So if I don't have any questions, I really don't have a show. Lori Jones asked the first question of the day. He said, "Hi Earl, your view on pinstripe heads on classic maple toms." Well, first off, I haven't played pinstripe heads in a long time, but I bought some pinstripe heads for my little Gretsch kit. The kit that I use on gigs, the maple Gretsch kit that's rarely in videos. Every once in a while it shows up. I think I did a few Tower Power videos last year with the maple Gretsch kit. And when I did that after I put hydraulic heads on it. And the reason I put hydraulic heads and skipped over the pins I've been holding on to was because the hydraulics were even deader, and we were going to a one microphone in the room scenario for our live stream at church, and I didn't want to overplay the mic. And I had G2s, Evans G2 heads on the little kit. So I have a 10, a 12, and a 14, and I had G2s on it, and they were really big sounding in this church. Church is very wooden, wooden high ceiling type scenario. When I'd hit it, the toms would go boom, boom, boom. I had a big sound. So I wanted to kill it a little bit, and I tried a pinstripe, an old pin I had hanging around on the 12, and I went to the pins. Not the pinstripe, excuse me, the hydraulic head. And I went to the hydraulics instead of putting the pins on. So I have a set of pins I need to do. So it's just a matter of time I'm going to put the pins on. Pins used to be really deadheads, but they're actually a lot more lively today, from what I understand, since some of my friends have talked about putting pins on the drums. So they got a little bit more brightness to them than the hydraulics. Originally, the pins and the pinstripe head was the answer to the Evans hydraulic head. And the Evans hydraulic head became famous by Steve Gadd. Now, other guys were using them, and they were around a lot longer than Steve Gadd's career even, probably. But nobody really caught on to them except for certain studio guys. And Steve Gadd was one of the guys that made the Evans hydraulic head famous. And that early Yamaha kit was one of those things that did it, and he got that sound from them. So I think the pinstripes are a nice way to go. Now, the pins, from what I've heard, they were too dead. They were too much like the hydraulics. Guys didn't want to use them, and that's why Remo adjusted their formula, and they've got a little bit more punch to them, more like somewhere between an emperor and an ambassador kind of scenario. It's a different thing. So I haven't played them in years. I'm hoping to put them on some drums soon, though, and when I do that, I will let you know. Couple other questions I got going on here. I got Mr. Dimma on. Hi, Mr. Dimma. You want to ask about recording equipment? Let me see. Hello, buying of recording equipment. Was it as step with fear about useless and crash of this purpose proposed idea? I'm trying to understand what you meant by that. Purpose idea. I mean, when I bought and I got a question from Dar, and don't go anywhere, Dar. I will talk about that. Mr. Dimma, when I bought my recording setup, it was to record my wife's album, my wife Stephanie, and I wanted to do studio drumming. So it was in New Jersey. It was 21 years ago now, and I started with ADATs. And I didn't buy recording equipment to do YouTube covers. Matter of fact, YouTube wasn't even around when I started doing recording. So I've been doing recording for over 20 years. It started with tape-based ADAT studio. I moved to Florida and moved into a bedroom. I was doing some demo stuff with ADATs, but I didn't have a good board, and they didn't really sound that good. And what I ended up doing was going to a Macintosh DAW scenario. And when I did that, I did my wife's album. I had a friend who went digital performer. I had another friend who was doing Logic at the time, who I may have on the show one day. And anyhow, the long and the short of it is, once I got into the DAW world, that changed everything at that point in time. And I've been in it ever since. And that's when I started acquiring more gear. And the DAW world allowed me to do a lot of things I wanted to do. And then that's when I started buying microphones. And so I've been spending money on studio equipment for 20 years. And I have all I need in studio gear to do the things I need to do for drum covers. but I'm not sure. You have to jump in at some point. So if you're going to jump in on a studio, one of the things you want to do is you want to get a good interface, one that can handle the amount of microphones you want to put in it. So for a drummer, that limits you to 8 channels or more usually. And then you want to have a good enough computer that can handle the processing of recording 8 tracks at a time. So really important. And I got some good comments here about that. Jim Flies 2 said, interface question. I'll get to that question too. We'll talk about that. So I thought it was on par with what we were doing. So, Mr. Jim, I don't know if I answered your question or not, but it wasn't fear for me. It was I wanted to have a studio and I wanted to record an album. And I did record an album. Eventually recorded the album. My wife's album came out in 2005. It was recorded mostly in a bedroom studio with musicians I just met when I moved to Florida, which is pretty wild, actually, if you think about it. But since then, I've done a whole bunch of albums. I've mastered albums. I've mixed albums. I've produced albums. I've played drums on albums. I've done a lot of demo work. I've done voiceover work and all kinds of crazy stuff. Matter of fact, this week I did a video and some voiceover work for somebody. So the video thing came into play about 2015 in my training world, my day job. So anyhow, let me get to Dar's question. I don't want to keep Dar around with a bunch of drummers. When did you start playing drums? My 9-year-old grandson Hunter has been taking lessons for 3+ years. Any simple tips for him? Okay, great question. My wife is texting me like crazy here. She's asked me if Greg got here, so I'm gonna say yes. I'll get that over with. Yes. She'll go, why is that so short? Okay. I started playing drums at 15. Actually, in 6th grade, I picked up drumsticks and started playing on a pad. And then I played in the school band. But it wasn't until I was 15 I got a drum set. And when I got a drum set, that's really when I consider I started playing drums. I will say to those of you that want to be drummers and you're young, like your grandson Dar, I think getting them lessons is a great idea, great starting point. I didn't do that for a year after I had the drum kit almost. But getting some lessons is a good starting point, and being an encouragement to that person to actually play the drums and giving them space to do it. I will tell you my challenging story. I was telling this to my good friend, my hairdresser, the one who did my hair today, Yvonne. My mom didn't make it easy for me to play drums, to be honest. My mom didn't really encourage me in playing drums. There are certain things in life that I got encouraged by my parents. That was not one of them. My grandmother got me a drum kit at 15, and my grandmother lived with us, and she got cases with the drum kit, which was really cool. I still own the cases that I had, my original kit's cases. Even though I sold the kit, I did not give the cases away. They became the cases for this drum kit at one point. Now they're fiber cases, really hard shell fiber cases. So when I was a kid, my mom said, if you want to play drums, you set them up in the den, but when you're done, you gotta take them down and put them away. And I had to put them away in my grandmother's bedroom. That wasn't a real encouragement for me to practice, because a lot of days I would come home from school and my friends wanted to go play ball for a little bit, and I'd have to choose between ball or playing drums. If I wanted to play drums, I had to take the drum kit out, set the drum kit up, play the drum kit. After dinner, take the drum kit down, put it away. And that went on for about 10 months. And believe it or not, I'm really good at taking down drums and setting up drums because my mom made me do it for a long time. And then finally she gave up and realized she wasn't going to stop me from playing drums. And I went to school and ended up studying music. So as far as it has to be in you, you want to do it. And I guess my mom figured that out. And if I wanted to do it, I was going to do it. And it stuck. 45 years later, I'm still playing drums. So I don't know if that's really encouraging to your grandson, Dar, but if he's been doing it for 3 years, he's 9 years old, it's really up to him if he enjoys it. Again, there weren't any things to make it easy to play drums back then. I mean, if you played drums, it was usually in school band. That was it. And if you didn't take lessons, you weren't going to get that good. And it wasn't even easy to play with records. Like I used to put records on a turntable, but I could barely hear them. And there wasn't even a headphone jack in this stupid record player we had. So I learned how to play a lot of records, just playing them with as loud as I could play it, and me playing at a volume that I could hear the music and my drumming. So it was pretty wild. But that's how I learned how to play drums, was playing along with records. And once I got into that, 16, 17, 18, 19, I started playing all the Chicago albums I could buy, and all my sister's 45s and every album she had. And by the way, all the drum covers I do that are from the 70s and stuff are things I used to play a lot of times. I used to play as a kid. You know, I had my sister would have the 45, and I'd put it on and learn how to play it. You know, so it's kind of crazy. But today you've got so much. You've got YouTube. You've got recording programs. Every kid I know on every street corner's got a DAW set up. It's crazy. So everybody's doing this. But thanks for the question, Dar. Lori Jones says a lot of people swear by pinstripes. Currently use clear emperors. I had clear emperors on this kit. Right now on my little Gretsch kit, just so you can see it, I'll kind of do this. I had clear emperors on this for a while. Matter of fact, I did a cover recently. Came out this week. It was the Chris Bodie cover, and it was with the clear emperors. Right now, I've got coated ambassadors on the drums and coated ambassadors on the bottoms. I finally replaced my clear ambassadors off the bottom heads that I had on for about 18 years. So got crazy and bought a coated bottom and a coated top. And the purpose for that is to see if I could like the coated scenario, which is the way I got these drums from Gretsch when I bought them in 79. But the other reason was probably in 9 months or, somewhere between 6 and 12 months, I change heads usually. So when these heads get to that point where I want to change them, what I will do is take the bottom heads, move them to the top, and buy some clear bottoms. I kind of like the clear bottoms. Gives me options later down the road if I want to go to clears again on the top. But I hadn't been playing clear emperors for years, so it's the whole thing playing clear emperors, and it's a different sound. And here's the thing about Remo heads. Remo heads take a while to break in. I mean, they really don't sound that good until you had them on the drums for a while. Something about Evans heads, you put them on and they sound great. And then all of a sudden, about 4 or 5 months later, they just don't sound that good, and you can't really tune them up. Somehow with the Remos, I get 9, 10 months, 12 months out of them. So, and with ambassadors, I've seen guys get tens of years of drum heads. You ever get an old vintage drum that's got the old drum heads and they still sound good? It's amazing to me. But Blake said, a lot of people like pinstripes. Power strokes are usually better, in my opinion. Well, power strokes on bass drums. I've never used power strokes on the toms, so I don't know about that. I've never used a power stroke on the toms. I've used them on the bass drums, power stroke 3s, power stroke 4s, and I've used them on the snares. But pins are a different thing. And by the way, I'm talking about clear pinstripes. I've used black pinstripes. Do not buy black pinstripes. They sound like garbage. I've never liked the black pinstripe. I don't like any black heads, by the way. I've never, even the front bass drum head black heads are one of my things I just don't dig at all. But black pinstripe heads were the worst pins I ever bought. The coated pins always look cool, but I never bought a full set. I've used them on the snares. That's actually interesting. So, and I am not endorsing Evans or Remo or Aquarian. They all make great heads. They're all different uses. And you can see I have a set of hydraulics in G2s. I like the G2s a lot, actually. But Remo has been something I've been playing my whole life. So using Remo's easy for me. Dar said, thanks. It's really fun. He doesn't own a drum set yet. That's the other key, Dar, is he needs a drum set. Definitely need to get him a drum set. Let me see. Going back. Jim Flies too. I don't want to skip anybody. That's my key here. But thank you for the questions. I really appreciate the feed. Morning Earl interface question. If you needed more than 8 XLRs, how do you chain them? In the Persona Studio One, pretty decent recording format. I haven't used Studio One, even though I have access to it. I have a Persona's Studio Live board, 24 by 4 by 2. Looks pretty cool. I've been using Logic and Digital Performer. I mean, how many DAWs can you learn? I mean, that's where I'm at with it. Logic. Once I learned Logic about 12 years ago, I dropped Digital Performer. I dropped Digital Performer somewhere around 2008. Around 2008, I think I dropped Digital Performer. It was Logic 8. So I was on Digital Performer 7 at the time. And I realized understanding two DAWs didn't make any sense to me. So I have no desire to learn another DAW. Now that I know Logic and I know it works well, I'm staying in Logic. The older you get, it's harder to learn things. Now I've learned things like video and Final Cut, and now I've learned StreamYard, and hopefully maybe one day I'll learn OBS. So I learned things that I need to learn, but DAWs are not things I need to learn. Once you know how to use one, you can get pretty much anything you want out of it. So, but as far as what I've done with interfaces, I actually have one of these too. Behringer's got a 8-channel ADAT light pipe add-on set of pre's, and I bought that from a Motu 828 MK3, which was my second audio interface. My first audio interface was a Motu 828 original MK1, and it had a ADAT light pipe fiber optic cable to add on more, and I used to use a PreSonus 8-channel, the Digimax it was called. Then I upgraded to the Behringer one. The Behringer one, which is the 402, I think, which is the one with the Midas preamps in it. It sounded really good. And I was using it for about a year. And then a friend of mine in 2017 was getting rid of this board and said, listen, I'll take $400 for the board. And I said, okay, I don't need the case, but I'll take the board. So he sold the case separately, made his money on the case, and gave me a great deal on that board. So I've been using that board now for about almost 4 years. So I have 24 channels of XLR, so I don't have any problems. I have 2 drum kits set up to it too. This drum kit in Studio A, and then I've got the Concert Tom kit in Studio B. They are constantly mic'd. This is why I can do drum covers so fast too. Is I'm not moving mics around very often unless I want to. So that's another advantage for me. And I will say the PreSonus board allows me to do that. Blake Nunn said, yes, pinstripes, okay. Pinstripes will open up a bit more than clear ambassadors. I don't know. Clear ambassadors are bright. They're pretty open. Matter of fact, the Concert Tom kit last year had clear ambassadors on the tops until I wore them out. And once I went over a year of clear Concert Toms on the ambassadors, I put my clear Emperors from this kit on that kit, and I had a few other clear Emperors. So the last 2 weeks I've been playing the Concert Tom kit with clear heads that you'll see clear heads on. That they're actually clear Emperors, not clear ambassadors, but clear ambassadors are pretty bright. You know, they're a single ply head, and that's why. Eric made it today. Hi, Eric from Drum Addict. Eric from Drum Addict, I'm trying to get you on. I didn't know if I could send you a link, I would have you on today. I don't know how to do that easily without being a real mess right here. I know how to do it, and I've done it in a mid-show before once. But, Eric, you tell me the day, and I'll have you on the show. Planning on doing another one next week. Mr. Jimmer, thanks. Very good. When your purpose is completed. I guess so. I guess I understand what you're saying there. Blake Nunn saying I snagged an 8-channel interface attached to an ADAT 8-channel extension for 16 channels. That is the easiest way to do it. It really is. That's what I've done with the Behringer one. The Behringer one is quite reasonable. Now, there's a couple other ones. There's a couple other companies that make them that are really, really pristine preamps. And it depends on how much money you want to spend. But if you want to just go for 8 channels of pre, I mean, this Behringer one was cheap. It was like $300. It was cheaper than my Digimax, which was about $600 when I bought it. And the Motu interface cost me, I think, around $700 when I bought it. So I'm actually spending less money on interfaces. I just lowered the prices pretty heavily there. Yeet Feet says, do you think that you should change your drum heads when you get your kit? My dad refuses to let me change the Remo UT heads to Remo ambassadors. That's a shame, because the Remo UT heads are the Chinese heads, the ones made in China, And I have a few heads. There was a music store that was going out of business in town in 2019 before COVID, and I bought a few of these Chinese heads off. They were brand new. It was the kind of thing where they had everything marked with like $2, $1 kind of thing. So I got a couple brand new UT pinstripe heads, a 10 for 10-inch heads, two UT pinstripes, and I got a couple 14 pinstripes UT, and for $2. I figured for $2, why not? So I put the UT head on the concert tom. It sounded okay, but it didn't. It's still not really the real deal. So I'm just saying, we know they're made in a different way than they make them in the United States. So there wasn't a Remo head. It was a Remo Chinese head. So I would recommend you get up to a Remo head as soon as you possibly can. That will help you to get a better sound off of whatever drums you're using. Usually they put those heads on the lower line drum kits, the ones that are considered beginner kits. So that's the reason why you find them on drums. Let's see. Blake Nunn said, I wasn't allowed to play when I was younger. My family saw how my professional jazz musician uncle lived doing it and wouldn't allow me to pursue it. I finally gave myself permission. Hey, that's good. That's important. You give yourself permission, no doubt about it. All right, let's go back. All right, Eat Feet. All right, Eric, hey Blake, good morning. Blake Nunn drums. I asked because the drum mutes don't sound like actual drums. It annoys me so much. Drum mutes. I missed that question. I don't know where that is. All right, let's see. Only blackheads I like are Evans EQ3 Rezo heads. Yeah, some guys do. I've never used an EQ3 Rezo head, by the way, by Evans. All my EMAD heads are just the batter head. I always have a Remo on the front, usually a logo head. Yeah, the ambassadors are super bright. Good morning, Sean. Eric wants to be on next week. I got a guest. Thank you, Eric. Okay. Wow, there's a lot of drum language. I'm clueless. Sorry, gotta run, Dar. Thank you for dropping in. Always appreciate when you come into my show. Let's see if we got any questions here. I see a lot of discussion in there. Chinese Remos getting on the show. Okay. Well, does anybody have another question for me? I see a lot of you guys. Hi, Michael Perry. By the way, good morning, Michael Perry. Those of you that don't know Michael Perry was the Google Plus guru of the drum community. Shouting out to Michael Perry. All classic drum covers and the Drummer's Den. Drummer's Den was Michael Perry. So all classic drum covers was Tony's group on Google Plus. So I've known Michael Perry a while. By the way, he asked me to play a song, and I want to let you know, Michael, I just downloaded it and put it in Logic and was making an extract stem before I got here with this. So hope to get that done. Now, it doesn't mean I'll get out next week. I've got a couple things in the queue that probably will go before it, but sometime it'll get done. Probably this weekend it'll get done. It's going to be a fun song to play. And I'll try to use some of my green screen technology on that one too. That's the goal here. It's always great to have friends in the feed. Any questions from the feed? Questions. There's no convincing him. I keep trying. Okay. Well, you know what? Get a paper out, and then you'll buy your own heads. That's probably what you'll end up doing at some point. My parents didn't go for a lot of things I wanted either. Like I told you the story this morning, the beginning of this thing about having to put my drums away all the time. My parents did not make it easy for me. Matter of fact, when I bought my drum kit, this drum kit I'm sitting at here, this Gretsch 1979 vintage drum kit, which is mine from college. I bought in college. I had them make it for me specifically in New York City at Professional Percussion Center. It was done to the New York City specs with the Pearl hardware on the Gretsch drums and all that stuff. When I bought this kit, I still owned a Ludwig Vistalite kit that my grandmother bought me. And my mom was like, you're in college, you need to pay bills, sell that kit. And I had to sell my Vistalite kit, which bummed me out. Bummed me out seriously. I did sell it to one of my classmates. And it was a bummer, you know. So parents do things that to kids. I can't tell you they don't. Now I wasn't that way with my son, but my son had his own way of dealing with instruments, and that's an interesting thing I won't get into today. Um, Sean Woodley, what's the benefit of learning traditional grip? So he's talking about this grip. This is the traditional grip. Let's see if we can do some camera adjustments and get to the pad. Let's see. Can we see the? Let's see where. Try to. All right. All right. So what's the benefits of learning this? Well, the benefits in my day was I was using a marching snare drum that was tilted like this, had a tilt on it. So the snare drum and the angle of the snare drum allowed this to kind of hit the center of the head. That was the purpose of traditional grip. To be honest, today I don't see an advantage to using traditional grip. It actually stops you from doing things like playing open-handed, and that was the problem. But if you ever watch who I think is the beginning of open-handed playing, which would be the great Billy Cobham. Billy Cobham could play traditional right-handed. He would play traditional left-handed. I watched him do this in drum. I could never play traditional left-handed. That's just not going to happen. I have no technique here, you know. But he could burn out a roll this way, and he could do it matched, and he'd flip it over. He'd do it that way. So he learned all the grips. But when he started playing open-handed, you would find him more times than not playing his left hand match grip. So match grip is open the drum kit up in a different way to a lot of drummers. And a lot of guys are big on open-handed playing today. And I think it opens it up. So what's the limitations of using a traditional grip is really the question. And the limitation is, I think, power. But when I watch a guy like Vinny or Steve Gadd or Dave Weckl or Steve Smith or Todd Sugarman play traditional grip and bang it out, I know that I'm wrong about that. But I don't think I have any power with this. Can I do it? I can. Actually, my rolls always sound better with traditional grip for some reason to me. Because I spent so many years just playing traditional grip to get my concert rolls together. But for power on the drum kit, that kind of thing, match grip just works better for me. And I think I have more power. I will say, I get a lot of questions about this too, this playing the back of the stick, which is a sound thing for me. It's a certain way I get a sound out of a snare drum. But I'm learning it's a disadvantage to play that way, because I really don't have clean doubles this way. I fake it, but I don't make it sometimes, and that bugs me. I was doing this Amy Grant cover, Gotta Let It Go, and there was this roll section. Pop, 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 and it... Pop, 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 and it wasn't clean. And I wanted to do it with traditional. It would have been... Wouldn't have been clean on traditional either. I ended up flipping the stick over to do it. Anyhow, I lost in my little world there. I don't know if that helps you or not, Sean, but that's the answer. I don't think there's an advantage to playing it, to be honest. But some guys do and are great at it. So, let's go back. Thank you, Michael Perry. Blake Nunn said, yeah, I would try to show him the real world examples and reasons why not case of Chinese Remos. Eventually he'll listen in the coded. Eventually those Chinese Remos are also going to just die on you and you're going to have to get new heads. That eventually happens. Jim Flies 2 said, I did 2-part on the UT heads. Check Jim Flies 2 channel out. They came with my Gretsch Catalina Club. Yeah, early on it was that cheap head. I think they've switched now. In the Catalina Clubs, they come with Evans heads for some reason. But they sounded good. And I just got a 10-inch add-on yesterday, and the UT head did not sound... Oh, it came with a UT head. Wow. So I changed them right away. I don't think the UT heads really do sound that good, so I took it off that concert tom. But if I needed a head to give to somebody, I have a brand new UT Pinstripe 14 to give to somebody who needed a drum head. So, hey, nice. Thank you, Eric Drums, for being on. Yes, Vinny Appice did play with his butt end. Vinny and Carmine. Carmine was the big guy on the butt end. Matter of fact, Carmine's sticks are nothing but butt ends. He has no tip. It has a butt end with a little honker of a tip. If you want to, that's so he can do this too. He plays with the, I can't get it in the camera. There it is. The finger thing. He loves that finger thing. That's the Carmine thing. I don't know about Vinny. I'm not a big Vinny guy, but I know he's a great player. Lori Jones, 66, osteoarthritis. Traditional grip has saved me. You know, that's a good point, Lori. You know, and I do know a lot of, I have a friend that switched back to traditional after playing years of matched. And maybe that's going to help me with my shoulder thing. I got this thing now with my shoulder. I get this pain right here in my shoulder after playing all weekend long. And I don't know. I mean, maybe it's connected in some way. And maybe I'll go back to playing traditional. I like playing traditional for jazz and light playing, but when I'm power playing, I have a hard time with that. Let's see. Playing with the butt end of the stick, Eric says, just realized how that sounded. Laugh out loud. Okay, well, good. Yeah, there are guys that play with the back end of the stick a lot, actually. Steve Gadd would play traditional with the back end of the stick. He'd be doing this. Come on, get in the picture. Where's my hand go? There it is. He would do this, playing a traditional grip. Matter of fact, there's a guy that analyzes Steve Gadd all the time. What's his name? He's from the Netherlands. And he's got he does analyze the Steve Gadd grooves and stuff. And you'll watch him do the black sticks, the Steve Gadd sticks, and he'll flip it over like Steve does. And he's an excellent player. He actually teaches at the university in the Netherlands. And what is his name? If anybody knows the name of the guy I'm talking about, put it in there in the thing. Save my butt right now because I reached out. But he's a great channel to watch. I would recommend you check him out. By the way, check out each other's channels. Those of you that are on here, I subscribe to all of you, and you subscribe to me apparently because you found me today. Any other questions for me today? Any other cool drumming questions, or did I miss any drumming questions here today? That's the whole thing. All right. You're going to unsub your own channel, Eric? That's interesting. I don't understand. Laugh out loud. Okay. So, I've talked about grips. We've talked about drum heads. We've talked about how I got started playing. And some of my stories there. Just trying to think, is there anything else you guys want to hear about today? What are your practice routines? Now, that's a great question, Blake. You know, what I tell young guys when they're playing is when you're young, practice as much as you possibly can. Because when you're young, you really do have time to practice. You just don't realize it. Mikey V is here. Mikey V's in the house. I have not talked to Mikey in a while. Mikey, how are you doing? I'm going back to Blake's question now, but rock on, Mikey. Mikey's from Canada. Great metal player. And he's taken some jazz brush lessons from me. That's a little aside with Mikey. He was my first Skype student, or actually FaceTime student. But back to practice routine. So when you're young, practice as much as you can get away with. And when I practiced, I would practice stick control, syncopation. I would take some of that and bring it to the drum kit. And I have a lot of different things I practiced in college that I would do. You know what I mean? But what do I practice today is very little. And that's what I'm trying to get to, is which as you get older in life, you end up practicing for what you have to do. You know, the kind of gigs you're playing, the songs you're working on to get through a gig for some reason. And you find yourself doing a lot less playing. Now, right now, one of the things I do is I've been working a little bit at stick control because Sean Woodley is taking lessons from me on FaceTime or actually on Zoom. And by the way, I do Skype lessons. If somebody wants some lessons from me, I'll be happy to teach some lessons. I don't do it a lot. It's pretty much on a one-off basis. People approach me and I decide if I want to do it or not usually. But if I was, because I'm teaching lessons, we're working on stick control, I've been spending more time on the first 13 uh, exercises on the first page of stick control, which you can get lost right there and have your life just doing those first 13 exercises and never leave there and be fine working on, with a metronome, doing singles, right start, left start, doubles, right start, left start, paradiddles, and then there's the variations that start to come in. And if you work stick control, the first 4 pages of stick control, your hands just turn into something else. Now, what I've done with Sean is I said, work on reading it across 10 times. He says 20, but everybody gets bored. If you want to do 10 or 20, it's fine. But work on reading it across, then going into the next one. So the first step was to figure out what's a medium tempo you can play everything at or keep going into them. So that took a while to figure that out for Sean. And I know it's taken a while for me to figure it out too. And I found out that I'm much slower on the easy ones that I can do much faster because I can't read them across and then flip hands and switch to a left start on a right on the downbeat kind of thing. But that's been an exercise I've been working on a lot. John Robinson, I took a lesson with this summer, has given me this exercise out of stick control doing triplets. It's page 37, and you basically accent all the figures on the page. You read it down, and you're accenting but playing with triplets. So I don't have the book in front of me. I don't have the exercise in front of me, but it's that kind of an exercise where it's, and you just triplet. So I'm trying to think of the first line. And you keep going from there. So those are some of the things I'm working on. Mostly what I work on is I sit down at the drum kit and I turn a click on and I play a groove. That's another thing I'll work on today. A lot of times when I'm just have nothing to do, I'll put my earmuffs on. I won't put the click in my ear. I'll just play it loud in the room. And I'll play it at a slow quarter note tempo and see if I can stay on it for how long I can stay on it, playing simple grooves. That's another thing that helps me to lock with click. So I hope that helps. Let's see. All right. But what I am saying to you, and I do want to make sure I say this clearly, is I don't warm up or play as much as I should. So when you're young, practice as much as you can. What ends up happening as you get older is that stuff comes back at different weird times when you need it. And I guess I'm still living on that. As you can see on my drum covers these days, I'm still living on what I've learned. All right, let's see. Good to see you too. Let's see, going back, left, out loud, approach to practice. Blake agreed, warm up before playing. Yes, it's a good idea. I agree. What brand style drumsticks do you prefer? That's from Eric at the Drum Attic. I have lots of sticks, lots of different sticks, but what I play the most is the Los Angeles. Let's find it over here. There it is. Los Angeles Fader 5As. And the reason I play these sticks is they are the cheapest bundled pair sticks that I've found in the last 10 years. I hate spending $10 a pair of drumsticks. I refuse almost. It's actually I refuse to pay $10 a pair. So normally I will buy 4 pairs of Vader LA 5As, which is a good middle stick for me, for under $30. So it's usually like 27 or 28, and I will buy them, and I'll buy them usually in 8s. Like I'll buy 8 pairs, and that way my cost per pair of stick is around 7 and change or whatever, and I feel okay about doing that. That's my biggest problem with drumsticks today, is spending a lot of money on them. And by the way, I've got tons of drumsticks everywhere. So it's not like I don't have drumsticks everywhere, and I've got all kinds of drumsticks for all kinds of scenarios. But what I play mostly is a 5A. I used to play a Vader Fusion for years, with the ball, the little ball stick. I don't think I have one around. Oh, I do. This is a Vader Fusion. This is a Vader Fusion with a nylon bead. I found a pair of these. If you can see that. Let's see. Go back over here. There it is. Very tough to see. Old Vader Fusion. But this has got a nylon tip. I wanted to hear. I don't play nylon tips very often, but I have a Zildjian Karope cymbal, 22-inch, and it doesn't have any definition, but when you use a nylon tip, it kind of pulls a little bit of the sound out I need. I don't use the Zildjians often for recording covers because it doesn't really have the bright sound I want. And I've become more bright since I started using Paistes over the years. And now with my 22-inch Paiste ride cymbal, the 2002, that thing's a killer. It's got a killer, beautiful sound with wood tips. But I found these. I had a pair of these, only one pair of these. But I used to use the wood tip version of this for years. Vader Fusions were my favorites. Vader Hickory sticks are pretty much it. I will use Promarks, and I will use Vic Firths occasionally, but I'm not a big Vic Firth guy. I don't have to play Vic Firths. I have to play Promark. If any one of these companies wants to give me an endorsement and wants to sell me sticks at a cheaper rate, I would buy them from you. If there was a small drumstick company that was giving me a real rate, I would do it. Let's talk about that for a second. That's an interesting one that's not in the news thing. A lot of guys ask about endorsements. Let's talk about endorsements for a second, because we think endorsements are really important. In actuality, endorsements aren't as important if you don't really get a real endorsement. There's a lot of these what I call pseudo endorsements, where they're companies that will basically let you buy their product at a price that's really market price for them. And it's the price they would have to sell it at if they were selling in a music store, but they sell it to you as an artist. And they give you little things like, we'll put your name on the cymbal. There's a couple companies that do this. They're really not Zildjian, they're not Sabian. Of course, they're a B20 cymbal, but they're not really an endorsement. Real endorsements are when you bring something to the table and they want to give you something for it. And that's why you get the price break. And that's an important piece of an endorsement. So if they're giving you an endorsement, but you really don't bring anything to the table, like you've got like 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, is not really bringing anything to the table, believe it or not. 4,300 subscribers, whatever I got today, 270, 4,270 subscribers is not enough to get an endorsement from anybody. Unless you bring something to the table, they're not going to give you an endorsement. That's the way it works. So you have to bring something to the table. So if you're getting an endorsement for not bringing anything to the table, it's probably not really an endorsement. It's what I call a pseudo endorsement. There's a lot of companies out there doing it. So if one of those pseudo drumstick companies came to me and said, yeah, we'll give you an endorsement. Just got to pay, $9 a pair, and we're going to give you our version of a 5A. I'm going to go, nah, I'll keep buying Vaders, to be honest, because that's the price. I can get it cheaper buying in bulk. That's what I've learned. So for me being a professional drummer, I'm going to buy in bulk. And that's how I do it. So be careful with endorsements, this concept of endorsements. They really don't mean anything. Like DMR custom drums, which I don't have my DMR here. I got a free snare drum out of him, but I actually gave him lessons. So it wasn't free. It was a trade-off. He gave me a snare drum with my name on it, and he did it to my spec, but I gave him lessons. And then I bought a drum from him, which cost me about as much as it would have cost me for a good snare drum at the time. So really he got something out of it. He got me to buy a drum. And if I went and bought the drum kit, I would have been buying the drum kit too. So custom drum companies really can't afford to give away stuff. Ludwig, Yamaha, Gretsch, Pearl, they don't give away stuff without getting something back. It's always quid pro quo when we talk about endorsements. You give something to them that they can't get any other way. And by having Todd Schuckerman playing Pearl drums on a Styx tour or making drum videos and having Pearl drums in them, okay, and people buying that video, guess what? Todd Schuckerman is a good investment for Pearl to give him the kind of deals he needs, and Vic Firth and Remo and whoever else he uses, or Sabian. That's how it works. So endorsements really mean something when you bring something to the table and you can give back. I don't know why I threw that in. I just thought that was my 2 cents today. Free. Let's see. Homework. Eric's drum says practice warm up is important. I agree. Try to make sure you didn't miss anybody. Forearm crusher, great exercise. 16 single strokes, doubles. Blake, you're a teacher. I expect you have a lot of good exercise on how to teach this. Lori Jones, I just got a Vic Firth pad. Next time when I'm watching soccer and TV, I'll work on flam rudiments. I always said that. I never did it, by the way. Sean Woodley said, what is your favorite cymbal? This week, my favorite cymbal is my 22-inch Peisty 2002 ride cymbal. A month ago, it was my 18-inch 2002 crash cymbal. It's whatever I buy new is my favorite. A couple years back, it was the Crobes. I mean, last year I got a set of Crobe hi-hats, 14-inch, which I use in church all the time. They were my favorites for a while. It all depends on what I get. It becomes my favorite really quick. My favorite brand of cymbals right now for most of what I do is Peisty these days. But I have a set of Sabians and I have a set of Zildjians. And I played Sabian for about 25 years, no endorsement, just bought Sabian cymbals and I loved them. But I played them so much, I don't really want to feature them anymore now that I've got these beautiful Peisty cymbals, which I really do love. Let's see, Lori Jones, I switched from Zildjian Anti-V. Oh, that's a stick, drumstick. Blake Nunn says, I'll usually go for Manhattan 5As. 7As, excuse me. Those are nice. They're super jazzy and they're super light. A little bit light for me. Check out Scorpion Sticks. That's Eric Drums. ProMark. Try to find the next question. Guys, got some good discussion going on here. Did I get through any questions? Did I miss a question? That's why I don't use the heads. Yeah, head drumsticks for $30 a pair is kind of steep, to be honest. But there's guys that there's what was it ProMark made, like a fire grain stick? I don't know if that was more expensive. There's a bunch of that kind of stuff out there. You know what I mean? Any other good questions out here? Am I missing something? Zildjian sticks. Don't really want to. I never played the Zildjian sticks, to be honest. I played their cymbals though. Thank you for Claus for saying that. Good and welcome to the show today, Claus. About the endorsements, appreciate that. Really haven't found a question. Anybody got one? Lori Jones. I see Peisty advertising a new power signature cymbal from last week because they crack. I don't know if it's because they crack. I think there's guys that want heavier cymbals right now. Again, it's starting to come back. I don't know if you guys realize this, but we had this really a renaissance of the 60s in the early 2000s. And what happened was Zildjian put out the Armand series. And when Zildjian put out the Armand series, they were a thinner A Zildjian cymbal because Armand Zildjian, who had just passed away, he was like the founder of the modern A Zildjian company. Avidus, his dad, Avidus, his dad, gave him the company pretty much. He took the company. I just heard a real cool podcast on Sabian with, I believe it was Robert Zildjian was on it. No, it was Andy Zildjian. Excuse me, Andy Zildjian. Robert was the dad. Andy Zildjian was the son. And he told the history of the Sabian cymbal company. And in that discussion of it, it talked about how him and his dad and Avidus, when Avidus died, how Armand and his dad split the company up. And how it happened that he actually could start another drum company because Avidus Zildjian gave him the factory in Meduc, Canada, before he died. He gave it to him. And the reason he gave it to him was they just always looked at that as like some kind of seconds factory. And Sabian was just this is where Asco cymbals were made, and it was the seconds factory. And they occasionally made some A-Zildjian cymbals that would go to Europe, because if you shipped out of Canada versus the United States, there was different tariffs. So they had a whole line of cymbals they would send to Europe that had had Avidus Zildjian Canada on it instead of Avidus Zildjian United States back in the 70s. Then what happened was Avidus Zildjian actually bought the K Zildjian name from the Gretsch company, and all those people that worked at the Istanbul factory got moved to Canada to work in the Canadian factory, and that's where they made the Canadian K Zildjians. And the Canadian Ks were the first Ks that I played on. To be honest, I didn't play on any of the old Ks when I was in college, but I had a couple friends who had Canadian Ks. And they were making as close to a K as you could get in the 70s, brand new. And I had a few friends that had a few of them. And I've played them. And the Canadian Ks are exactly like the early 80s Sabian HHs. By the way, I have a whole set of Sabian HHs from the early 80s, when Sabian first started producing the hand-hammered line. And the reason why they were HHs was for hand-hammered. And when Zildjian put out the K line in the United States in the 80s, they were not a hand-hammered cymbal the way they were making them in Canada, in Sabian land. Sabian was still making the Canadian K format. And as a matter of fact, the early labeling on the Sabian cymbals was that Canadian K labeling. They were using the same stamp. So my thin crash, 17-inch crash, has got that stamp on it. And so when Sabian was started, out of the father dying and the brother splitting the business up, Robert Zildjian, who was the founder of Sabian, Avidus literally gave him that factory and willed it to him. And he was able to work out a deal with Armand to basically start producing Sabian cymbals in Canada. And they split the business up. And now Sabian is actually the largest cymbal company in the world. They exceed Zildjian now in sales, I believe. And the cost is more than Zildjian's now. When I started buying Sabians, they were less than Zildjian by about $15 a cymbal. But why did I start this? I started about Armand. So when Armand died, they started making these thin Armand cymbals, which I have a couple of them. I have a beautiful Baby Ride, which is beautiful. I have an 18-inch thin crash. It's beautiful. Zildjians in the 80s and 90s were really always a little too heavy I didn't like the way they felt. They felt too heavy. And the reason for that was in the 80s, they started making heavy cymbals again. Actually, they started making heavy cymbals because the rock guys demanded heavy cymbals. And the apex of the heavy cymbal thing was the Z line of the Zildjian company. A lot of guys equated the Zildjian Z line with the Paiste Rude line, but it wasn't. The Rude line had so much more, were so much thinner cymbals than the Z line. The Z line is just a really thick, nasty cymbal, really is. Some of the worst cymbals ever is probably the Z line, if you ask me. Even though I have a KZ, 13-inch KZ combination, that Z on the bottom is so thick and nasty, it's not even funny. But gives you that chicky sound that guys really wanted back in the 90s. So here's the renaissance. The Armand line ended up pushing Zildjian to making the redone A's in the mid-2010s. And those redone A's were more like moving towards the 60s A's. Now, meanwhile, back at the ranch, Paiste was reintroducing the giant beat line in 2005, and the giant beat line was that thinner 60s kind of cymbal. So guys were starting to buy giant beats, and the 2002 started to take a notice of that and started to thin out their line. So in the mid-2010s, we started to see cymbals thinning out, and going more towards that 60s, 50s sound, which was a thinner cymbal, which I love that sound. That was the sound I was looking for. The next thing to come up on the Zildjian radar was the Kerope cymbal, which was supposed to be like a K in the design of the Kerope. Kerope, who was the one that came over from Istanbul, was making the cymbals in Sabian's factory, by the way. And basically what happened was they made a really thin, dark cymbal. And as soon as that happened, Vinny left Zildjian before that, and Vinny went over to Paiste, and they reintroduced the 602 cymbals, and then the 602s got reintroduced with Modern Essentials, and they became thinner and darker. And the next thing you know, you've got the Big Beat 2002s, which are a thinner, darker 2002 cymbal, which is a little bit darker than the Giant Beats, which I have one of those. And then Zildjian put out the Avidus line, which is like totally swinging back to the 60s, really getting that thin but nice, bright cutting 60s ride sound that you heard on 60s recordings. And all of a sudden, we had this renaissance of thinner cymbals. And Sabian had its versions of those things in the vintage line and the H line. And when you look at it, that's where we're going. And now we're renaissancing back to heavier cymbals. So I think you're going to see a lot more heavy cymbals coming in the pike, because in 2020, when Paiste reintroduced the 602 line, their addition to it was the heavies and the mediums. And the mediums were heavier than the regular ride that they came out with, the 602 medium ride. They went to a medium cymbal, and then they went to a heavy cymbal. And 602 heavies, so we're going that direction. And I remember talking to John Robinson. He had got a set of Sound Edge 15-inch Sound Edge heavy 602 cymbals. So it seems like they're climbing towards heavy again. So get ready for heavy cymbals to come down the pike. And the guys that bash will always want heavier cymbals, and the guys that don't bash will want the thinner cymbals. And I'm glad I finally assembled a set of cymbals I really love playing, which is my 2002s, my Giant Beats, my Caropes, and my old Sabians, my old 80 Sabians, which are the closest to that hand-hammered dark thing from the 70s I'll ever get, So let's see what we got here. So much. All right, Pisces advertising new power. I got to that, Eric. No matter what happens, keep practicing. Two brothers getting a fight at Sabian. Yeah, that's how it happened, kind of, sort of. That's kind of the story. The Sabian story, Sabian Zildjian story. They just couldn't work together is really what it came down to. The two guys, they loved each other, but they couldn't work together. And in the end, they loved each other before they both died. And that's the truth. That's what Andy Zildjian was telling us. Signature 18-inch full crash, which cuts, rideable. Yeah, you guys know my problem with the signature line, don't you? I pretty much stated it. The signature is the Paiste alloy that is specific to Paiste cymbals only. It's the B15 alloy, I think they call it. And I just find it to be a little soft, and it dents and breaks easy. That's my problem with it. The B8 alloy seems a little bit more stable and doesn't crack as easily. I'm not saying you can't crack a B8 cymbal, you can, but hello, Earl. Hey, Drumico Gunter's in the house today. Thank you for being here. Lori Jones, been playing new beats since 1976. I have a 2002 Sound Edge, but mine is a 15-inch new beats. I have a set of 14-inch new beats from 1979 that I use. Great cymbals. Gotta have a set of new beats. I've had a couple sets of new beats, so definitely need to have them. There are so many cymbals out there, guys. I'm telling you. I'm not telling you to buy the cymbals I buy. I'm just telling you there are just so many sounds out there to get. There's just so much you can do. The Paiste signature alloy, though, I just don't want to spend the money they cost for those cymbals to break those cymbals and dent them up. That's my problem with it. So once I started playing 2002s and figured out that the sound really attracted my ear. And by the way, my first introduction to the Paiste alloy, the 2002 alloy, was in the Paiste 505 cymbals in college. When I was looking for a 16-inch crash cymbal to replace my A Zildjian 16-inch thin crash that I cracked, I bought a Paiste 505 crash, and I just loved the cymbal. And I was sorry I sold it. I sold it to somebody. That bothered me. But that's life, in the big time. I have a lot of gear regrets. We can talk about gear regrets all day, probably. Let's see. Anybody else got a question for me today? Blake, you've got a lot of comments in there. Thank you for sharing amazing symbols, Earl. Thank you that. Just trying to see if I missed any questions today. Oh, that's it. Still got 12 of you out there. I'm going to give you one last chance to ask me a question. And I'm trying to make sure it's a question. And if not, I'm probably going to end it. I promised to be out of here before 11 because I got something to do at 11 o'clock. And I do thank everybody that came on the show today and asked questions and commented. And I'm glad to see that we had some community stuff going on there. Everybody feeding each other a little bit. That's awesome. That's what this is about. Let me know in the comments after the video if you enjoy the live stream, if you want me to keep doing it. Next week's guest is going to be Erica the Drum Addict. He kind of signed on today, so we'll have more on that as time goes on. Looking forward to having Eric on. Eric and I have an interesting story, both of us. So I don't know how deep we'll get into that. We may not touch that at all, but knowing the fact that we both talk and we both enjoy sharing from our life, we probably will. Jess123 Taylor. Hi, Earl. I love your channel. This topic about cymbals is very helpful. I'm planning on buying an acoustic kit on a budget. What would you recommend? Thanks for the question there. And thank you for liking my channel. I appreciate that. Budget kits. By the way, this is a question that's supposed to be in the next Ask Earl Anything that Adam AR drummer asked me, but I'm going to put it in this. Adam doesn't always watch the repeats. Jez, I would say this. There are a lot of good drum kits that are in that $500, $600 price range. My favorite is the Catalina Club kits by Gretsch. Those are my favorites. And if I had $500 hanging around that my wife would let me spend it on, because I do have $500 hanging around right now that's sitting in my bank account, in my drumming bank account, because of all the extra little work I've been doing, I would buy a Catalina Club kit with an 18-inch bass drum and a 12-inch tom and a 14x14 floor tom. Now, they do have Catalina Club kits at rock sizes for similar amounts of price, but along that level, Catalina Club, then you've also got PDP's got a kit, you've got Sonar AC, AC2s, I think they're called, or AQ2s. There's a nice midline kit. Tama's got a budget kit in their Imperial Star range. I used to love the Silver Star kit. I think that's gone. It was all birch. I really dug that kit. Yamaha's got one. If you're looking in that range, just go for a bigger name drum company and you'll probably find a good kit that'll work. Most of the name drum companies have something in that price range that is a really good kit. But Catalina Clubs, really nice kit. Blake, the frequent flyer kit you bought, which is a great kit for traveling, is a little different animal than your basic intermediate kit. Most intermediate guys want to have a decent sized bass drum. So Catalina Club's got a 20-inch bass drum. A Gretsch 20-inch bass drum can do it all. It always has. And I have been using a Gretsch 20-inch bass drum for a long time. I would just go with the 18 because I'd rather carry an 18 than a 20 these days. But 20, 12, 14 is an acceptable setup. If you want to go 22, 13, 16, acceptable setup. The frequent flyer's got this shortened bass drum, which has a very powerful sound. And there are these jungle kits, I'll call them. Sonar used to call it a jungle kit for like the drum and bass drumming stuff. My son-in-law just bought a little Sonar Martini kit for my grandkids and him to play and take out if he had to do a gig with a 16-inch bass drum. I just find 16s to be a little small for me. I think it's kind of a cool bebop thing to have a 16-inch bass drum, but again, that's a different thing. And I do know that the Flyer kit is a 20-inch bass drum. It's just a 10x20, I believe, not a 14x20. So, but again, everybody's got a different vibe they're going for. But I like Gretsch. I'm a Gretsch guy. What can I tell you? I'm going to keep being a Gretsch guy my whole life. Hold on a second. Knocked my water over. Need a sip. All right, 12 by 20. Awesome. Thank you, Jez, for letting me know it was helpful. Great. By the way, I'm just giving my opinion, and opinions is what this show's about. This is what you guys are listening to. Ask Girl Anything has always been about my opinions. Hanging with the Hammer is always about my opinions. I try to sit in the middle of things, and not really choose one or the other, but I do have, you can see the preferences I have by what I choose. I mean, I'm playing Pisces cymbals because I like Pisces cymbals. There's no doubt about it. Not because Pisces giving me cymbals, because they are not. I wish they were. They were. That'd be great. Hi, Brian. Brian Corey's on today. Good old friend Brian. So thanks for being on the show today. You're catching the back end, Brian. Any other questions? It's 10:40 and I'm about ready to kind of take the chill on this, unless there's another good question like the last one that Jez gave me. That was a great question. All right. Sarcasm. Hi, Sarcasm. Thanks for being here. How do the Ludwig 3-ply shells render different sound from the Gretsch 3-ply without re-rings? Well, first off, I have played a Gretsch 3-ply without re-rings from the 50s. That's a different animal than the 6-ply thin shell Gretsch with the silver sealer drums I have right here. These are with the silver sealer thin shells. The Gretsch 3-ply, the Ludwig 3-plies, I've played those too. I had a Ludwig blue club day kit, blue sparkle club day kit, which it's one of my regrets getting rid of that kit, giving that kit away. I gave that kit away. That maple poplar or the mahogany poplar shells of the 3-ply Ludwig kits are amazing with the re-rings, those old drums. Now, if they were in round. If they went out of round, they were crap. So that was the problem. If you can find an old Ludwig kit that's in round, bass drum, floor toms, high toms, you got money. And I had one, but that little club day kit was money. That sounded awesome. Had the white paint on the inside. It was the mahogany shelled ones from the early 60s, the Ringo era. Killer drum kit. Killer drum kit. And I'll stop there because I'll start to cry if I talk about it too much. But Gretsch and that are two different things. There was a deep, fat Ludwig sound that came from that mahogany 3-ply shell, and Gretsch has always had that maple poplar shell drum that they make. And with the gum, they call them gum in the mill. It's like, I don't know, it's a gumwood. It's like maple gumwood shell. So the secret in the silver sealer and the gumwood shell and the die-cast rims just makes Gretsch drums sound the way they do. And the older your Gretsch kit is, the better sounding it is. And they usually stay in round. And they're awesome. It's awesome. They're awesome drums. Are they making drums better today? I think they are, to be honest. I think they'll probably last hundreds of years. I think if you take care of an instrument, drums especially can last a long time. So all that to say is I think they're just different animals, but they're both great drums. I think if you wanted that rock Ludwig sound, that Ringo thing, the 3-ply Ludwig shells with the reinforcing rings were the way to go. Now, stay away from Ludwig late 70s 6-ply maple thick shells. Stay away from Slingerland late 70s, the thick 5-ply shells that started getting crappier and crappier into the 80s. Once you start looking at the 80s, late 80s, late 70s, early 80s stuff, they started making really bad drums in the United States. And that's when Tama, Pearl, and Yamaha came up in a big way. And they just tore up the market. So that's why, again, Ludwig has gone back to making shells the way they used to make them, and they started making some great drums again. So Ludwig's making some great drums today. I'm not knocking new Ludwig drums. I'm just knocking that one period from like the late 70s to the 90s. They seem to really be in a slump. And that has to do with management, by the way. Selmer owned the company and all that other good stuff back then. So Uh, a lot has to do with the people running businesses. That's the other thing you got to look at. Slingerland, when Bud Slingerland died, that company just took the nosedive right off the shelf, and all the endorsers jumped. John Robinson and Danny Serafin and everybody jumped from Slingerland. They ran from there, and Yamaha started getting everybody in the late '70s. People would go, they would do a tour in Japan, and Yamaha would provide you drums, and they'd sign you up with an endorsement, and everybody seemed to get them. Yes, Gunter from Germany, Drumico, basically saying Sonar. Sonar has always been there, and Sonar is a completely different thing than Ludwig or Gretsch. I mean, the Sonar beach shells are amazing, and those Sonar beach shells with the rosewood on the outside and the inside, what an amazing drum kit. And then they went to Babinga and the ebony shells, forget it. In the mid-'80s, when drums got bigger and longer, I mean the long shell thing and the power toms, all that stuff, Sonar made some really big sounding drums, really expensive drums too. I mean, really expensive to make drums. But if you could afford the Rolls Royce of drums, you bought them. They were really expensive drums back then. But yeah. Now, Sonar has got some midline kits and stuff, but, if I could afford a Sonar kit, I'd take a set. Somebody want to give me a set? The Sonar Vintage Series are very cool drums, too. I've seen them, heard them played. I've just never played them. But, yeah, I agree. Sonar's great drums. There's only a few companies that I just don't really dig, to be honest. I don't want to really throw them out there when I don't dig. But they're usually the companies you don't hear me talking about that guys say, oh, these are great drums. I go, okay. All right. I don't say nothing about them, Anybody else? Anything? SQ2s. Yes, the SQ2s are the Sonar series. That's why Ian Pace switched from Ludwig to Pearl. You're probably right about that, Lori. That is probably correct about that. Ian Pace was a huge Ludwig guy. He just said, no, I'm done. I'm done with the crappy quality. The quality got really bad in the early 80s. It was terrible. I mean, let's talk about how bad it was for Ludwig. Ludwig had so many white Vistalite drum shells in all sizes that they started covering them with chrome and making these chrome drum kits that were really Vistalite drums with chrome wrap around them. And they didn't think people were going to get ticked about that. I mean, you're ordering a concert tom kit, you're getting plexiglass, plastic, wrapped with chrome on it. It's like, give me a break. What the heck were they thinking at that point in time? They're thinking they can get away with anything. And they had to get rid of that old stock. And that's what they were doing. And it was the worst period of time. Ludwig drums then just went Slingerland. By the way, when I bought this Gretsch kit, Gretsch was on that same path, by the way. They were still making those great shells, those great Jasper shells. But Gretsch made the worst hardware, period. And the custom amplifier company was not doing anything about it. And that's who owned Gretsch at the time. But they were still making the great shells and the great die-cast hoops. So the drum shops would buy Gretsch drums and put other people's hardware on them. It would be Rogers or Pearl or Yamaha in the 80s or Ludwig or Slingerland. You would find all kinds of Gretsch drums with other people's mounting hardware on it and feet, bass drum legs. It all happened because Gretsch was making terrible hardware. They just couldn't make a complete drum kit that was any good, but the shells were great. And guys knew it, and they were buying them. But the difference was Ludwig and Slingerland, the shells went down. So when I went to New York City to buy a drum kit, I wanted to buy a Slingerland kit like Danny Serafin. And I went in there and said, I want to buy a Slingerland kit. I want a 20-inch bass drum, 14 by 20. I want an 8 by 12, a 9 by 13, a 14 by 14, and a 16 by 16 floor tom. And the guy in the set said to me, he said, you don't want Slingerland. You want Gretsch. I said, what do you mean I want Gretsch? No, you want Gretsch. You do not want Slingerland. Do not buy Slingerland. Buy Gretsch. I said, great. He goes, and you want a 10, 6.5 by 10, an 8 by 12, a 9 by 13, and a 10 by 14 on a stand, just like Steve Gadd. And I said, no, I don't. I want a 14 by 14 floor tom and a 16 by 16. I'm happy I made that decision. I eventually bought an 8x10 tom, which is on here today, and I bought an 8x8 tom. So I have an 8, a 10, a 12, a 13, a 14, and a 16 tom. I have 6 toms to go with my Gretsch kit. But I'm glad I did not buy it on the. I have a friend who bought that exact kit, and that's exactly what he did. So, and that's my little indicator telling me it's time to wrap it up. So let's see, one last chance to look at things. Not to mention, it was very hard to get Gretsch in the 80s. Oh, yeah, it was. Because Gretsch switched drum companies. Charlie Roy bought the company, and they were hard to get. Gretsch was really tough until 2000s when Gretsch really came back. Even into the 90s, yeah. Gretsch it almost went out of business, it seemed like. It seemed like it was going there. Vinny revived Gretsch. When Vinny was playing Yamaha, and he was still playing a Gretsch kit in the studio, and so was Jeff and everybody else. When Vinny showed up in England on that Sting, that Ken Sumner's Tale album, and they took some video footage of Vinny recording with a Gretsch kit in England, his 10, 12, 13, 14, or 14, 16 setup he had, Maple, with power toms. Really, if you ever watched the 10 Sumner's Tales 7 days video, if you look it up on YouTube, you'll see Vinny playing drums from that session, and they're recording in a castle somewhere. And Vinny's playing Gretsch, but he's a Yamaha endorser there. He was a Yamaha endorser. And Yamaha got really pissed at Vinny, and then Vinny said, "The heck with this, I'm playing Gretsch. I'm out of here." When Vinny gets it in his mind, he's going to be out of somewhere. That's what he does. He just goes. Like when he left Zildjian, there's another famous Vinny. I like to love Vinny. I just love Vinny. There's another famous Vinny video of him playing 7 days in the concerts from like 2011, 12, right at the time he was getting ready to switch to Paiste. And we now have cell phone cameras. So this guy's watching Vinny really intently playing 7 days. And he's got the camera on him. He's like this with the camera. He's doing this thing to the guy. Doing this. And Vinny can see him. You see it on his face. He's getting pissed that this guy's taking video. Well, I think the real reason he was getting pissed was because Vinny was playing Paiste cymbals, and he was supposed to be playing Zildjian. He was playing a whole set of Paiste 602s, and it was before it came out. It was like, this is before it came out, and everything got out there. So when Vinny wants to play something, Vinny plays what Vinny wants to play. That's the way it goes in the real world, and that's the way it is for all these guys. When they want to play what they want to play, they play what they want to play. They don't care. It doesn't matter how much money you give them; they're going to play what they want to play. So that's the way it works. Thank you all for being on my show today. I do appreciate it, and I had a lot of laughs. Hopefully you had a lot of laughs and a lot of interaction. Thank you, Robbie Rock Drummer, and I see Sean and Blended Roast. Blended Roast is here, and Lori Jones and Gunter Drumico and Brian Curry and Lori Jones and Sean. I already said Sean. I think I said everybody. And Eric from the Drum Attic will be on next week. And we will do a more of an interview style show with some questions, of course. So I appreciate you all being on there. Probably we will go back to our 9 o'clock hour next week. That's what I'm going to try to do. Unless Eric tells me he can't do that for some reason. And, that way if we go into an hour and a half, I don't have to jump off. But I do have to jump off now. Thank you all for watching. I do appreciate you all watching the live stream. Thanks. And all of you have a great day. Bye, everybody. More drum covers coming, I promise. See ya.